So let's keep working on our front end and get to the point where we actually can submit some data to the back end. And of course, we'll have to go back to the back end and create a couple of handlers, but we'll get to that before too long. So back in the file, user-edit.view in the front end, let's uncomment out the import to Noti because I'll be using that for a moment. And what I want to work on this time is the submit handler. And of course, this is the one that is fired when the user clicks a button that we haven't created yet, but we'll get to that shortly. So what we'll need is a constant payload, as usual, and make that equal to ID, and that will be equal to whatever we received in the URL. So again, it would be parseInt, because it needs to be in the form of an integer, casting to a string, and we're calling this dot $root, that magic variable available to us from Vue, params.userID, and case matters, so get that right. And again, I'm going to make sure that's converted to a base 10 integer. So that's the ID of the user we're going to be adding, or editing. And in this case, it'll be 0. So then we want first name, and that's just this.user.firstname, and last name, and that will be this.user.lastname, and email, which is this.user.email, and password, which is this.user.password, and password, which is just, not surprisingly, this.user.password. Okay, so there's our payload. Now we'll write a fetch statement to something that doesn't exist yet, okay? So we'll write a fetch to, and I'm going to go to, I'll use backticks this time, process, so $ open curly brackets process, .env.view underscore app underscore API underscore URL, closing curly brackets. And I want to assume that the path will be /users, let's try that again, /admin /users /save, okay? So that will be the URL I call. And of course, the second parameter is just security dot request options and passing that payload. Then I'll get my response as usual and convert it using response.json. Then we're going to get our data and use an arrow function, and we'll check for an error. If data.error, then we'll call noti.alert, and we'll give it the type of error, and the text will be response.message. Okay, so that's if there's an error. Otherwise, for right now, I'll just say noti.alert, and I'll put a success up there. So type is success, and of course we'll want to redirect the user somewhere after this, but this is enough to get us to the point where we can test things easily. And the text will be changes saved. Okay? And then down here, I'll put a catch in as well. Dot catch the error. And I have to use an arrow function. And get rid of this closing parentheses and put it down here where it belongs. And it's not cache, it's catch. Apparently I can't type today. That's better. So we catch the error, and all I'll do there is just post an alert. And get rid of this extra character. I really can't type today. So we'll copy this Noti alert, paste it here, format it properly, and we'll change the text for the error response to error. So there's that. Now, let's go back up to our form and let's put some buttons in here. And I'm going to put actually 3 buttons in. So I want 2 on the left side. One will be to submit the form, one will be to cancel and go back to the list of all users, and the last one will be to delete an existing user. So there has to be some logic in here, and it's pretty simple. So using Bootstrap's div class equals float-start, which will put it on the left because we're a left to right language in English. So that's at the start. I'll put a div there, and I'll close it. And inside of that, I'll put an input, type equals submit, class equals button, say button primary, and then I'm going to put me-2, okay, to give a little bit of padding on one side. And then the value for that will be equal to save. So there's one button. Then I'll put in a router link, which means I'll have to import the router in a minute. A router link that just goes back to /admin/users. Okay, and the class for that will be, say, button outline secondary, and it's just called cancel. And we close the router link. Now before I forget, let's come down here and import the router. So we'll import router from the current directory up one level over to the router section and index.js. Okay, so now I've imported that so I can use router link. We have those two buttons. Now I'll put one over on the far right. So div class equals float end. And I'll close that div. And before I forget, I'll put a div class equals clearfix. Otherwise, the rest of our page might get messed up. And inside of here, I'm going to put a button, but only in certain conditions. And of course, this is going to be just a button, so I'll use an A-link and use Bootstrap to make it look like a button. And I'll put a v-if in there, and that will be equal to, in parentheses, this $root.params.user ID is greater than 0. That's my first condition. You don't want to try to delete a non-existent user. It makes no sense to have that button show up when we're adding a user. So that's the first condition. And the second condition is I should never be able to delete my own user account while I'm logged in. So in this case, I'll say parseInt, casting to a string, as usual, this $root.params.user ID, like that, closing that off, converting it to base 10, if that's not equal to, not exactly equal to, store.user.id, which means I need to import the store as well, if I haven't already. And it looks like I haven't, so I'll do that in a moment. So that's my condition, the v-if condition, okay? And now I'll just finish off my A tag. Class equals button dash danger, make it red. And the href will be equal to JavaScript void 0 semicolon, so it doesn't do anything. And I'll add an at click handler, at click. When this is clicked, go to confirm delete. It doesn't exist, but it will in a minute. And we pass it this.user.id. And delete and close the A tag. Okay? Now I need to add this function, confirm delete, and I need to import store. So let's import store. Import store from /store. Okay? And now I'll come down here and add that necessary method, wherever those are. There they are. So after submit handler, I'll add confirm delete. And I won't make it do anything right now, but I'll just add it so we don't have an error. So if everything went according to plan, I should be able to make sure this compiled. And it looks like there are 3 errors. So router is defined but never used. Looks like I didn't need to import that at all, so I'll get rid of it. Of course not. So there's the first one. Next one, store is defined but never used. So I better add store to data. And finally, response is not defined. So I have a typo somewhere. And it's data.message. And now compiled. Okay, so 3 typos. Not unusual when I'm writing code. So let's go back and just have a look and make sure a form appears the way I want it to appear. So back I go to my web browser. And that's perfect. Okay, now what if I change this to say a 5 and hit return? Does the delete button show up? And it does. Okay, now this doesn't do anything, and this doesn't do anything either because we haven't written the necessary backend code. But the cancel button should take me back to admin/users, and it does. Okay, so in the next lecture, we'll go write the necessary backend handlers, then we'll come back to the front end and see what else I got wrong.